All right, guys, we are back for another live stream. We got Bowers and Wilkins, Sound United. We got Andy Kerr. How you doing, Andy?
Hi, Gene. Good. Great. Thank you for having me on this.
It's been years since I've seen you, man. I mean, the last time I saw you, you guys had an unveiling of the 700 series, Bowers and Wilkins. You flew us out, and we listened to some great music, had some good food, and then COVID hit, and then you've been somewhere stuck in the UK because I haven't heard or seen a peep out of you.
I know. That's the thing, right? I mean, we were saying this earlier on. I think the whole situation has just been really strange. Certainly for me, I'm very used to coming out and seeing you guys, spending time. This is actually the longest single period of time I've been away from the US in probably 30 years. So it's great to be back. I'm hoping to be able to come back again, of course. Let's hope things continue to improve.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to get out again and be in front of people. Speaking of people behind the scenes right now, we have Phil Jones, as you guys know. Say hello. I'll make you full screen so we can see both of you. Hold on a second. There you go.
Yes, the first time we are both in the same room. Look at that. Half the time he's on one screen and I'm on another. So
yeah. I can't get you unless I zoom it out. I can't get you all the way. But
I'll just lean like this whenever I'm talking.
You're gonna have a sore back
you don't
after
want to
this.
talk to me. You actually want to talk to this guy right here because this is the
it's
one
all
that
good,
we want to
man.
pick their brains.
Yeah, so this is a cool room that you guys are in now. Now this is the new Sound United headquarters. This is where in California are you guys at?
We're located in San Diego County, a city called Carlsbad, a little northern San Diego County. Brand new facility. We continue to upgrade it. We actually just went in and redid all of the acoustic treatments in this room again because the engineers listened to it and said they wanted a little bit more spaciousness and warmth to the space. So we went through and redid it. So hopefully we'll give the opportunity for some of your fans, Gene, to maybe come down and spend some time in the facility and we can play some good music and hang out.
So the public, it's open to the public. They could come in and do some demos, or you're saying it's more of a press thing?
It's more of a press thing, but hey, I know a guy. His name is Gene. So maybe maybe later we could talk about maybe running some sort of contest or some sort of thing that we could bring. I'd love to bring a couple of your fans down here to do some stuff.
That'd be awesome. There's a lot going on in that room, man. You got not only do you have the awesome speakers there, the Bowers and Wilkins, those are the 801s, right? 801 D4s. But you got my favorite amplifiers. I'm not gonna lie, man. Those Class A amplifiers, those are engineering marvel. I freaking love Class A amplifiers, especially when I tested the CT 2300. And you've got the monoblocks, which goes beyond the 2300.
Yeah, and you'll see that, like I said, this is kind of a match made in heaven. I mean, Andy can talk about the fact that this is, you'll see this combination of a variety of recording studios, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So you go to, for example, Abbey Road Studios as one of many places around the world that uses 800 series Diamond, and yeah, it's fully fitted out. In fact, in Abbey Road Studio 1, which is the most famous one, using film sound creation, they have a vertical biamping configuration. So there is a ton of delta in that room. It's probably one of the heaviest rooms you're going to go in every sense, not in terms of the speakers, but in terms of the sheer weight of delta product in there as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that we had talked about was a lot of times when we talk about Abbey Road, you think about recording, and you can think of all of the famous musicians and bands that have went through Abbey Road and to do recordings. But we were actually looking through our kaleidoscope, and he was just pointing out all of the different movies that were actually mastered on Bowers as well, because there's actually a multi-channel mastering space in Abbey Road where they master a lot of the major movies you see. So these speakers are utilized, and this combination is utilized not only for music but also as a reference for even movie production.
Cool. And I got to give a shout out to your shirt there, Andy, the Abbey Road Beatles. Awesome. What is I'm just curious. I assume you're a Beatles fan because I know you're a Pink Floyd fan, and usually people that like Pink Floyd also like the Beatles. What's your favorite album from the Beatles?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a great question. I believe it or not, really like the White Album because I just like the eclectic nature of it and the way it kind of moves through so many different genre types in one period. But actually, cliche as it sounds, overall, I would say Abbey Road, because I think there's, particularly on that second side, there's just such an unbelievable range of musicality in one piece of recorded music. It's an album that you can keep playing and keep playing. I had a very special experience with that one. If you can give me indulgence on a quick story on that one, back in 2012, the guys working up there had done a full white glove restoration of the original audio tapes to try and create some new mixes. A guy working, Sean McGee, a good friend of mine, had spent 2 years of his life basically going through that whole process. And we wanted to do a playback event. We did a playback in Studio 2 with those records that he'd worked on, and we used obviously our speakers in the live room to kind of play back, which they don't normally get used in. They normally get used in the control room. So we were kind of concerned about how it was going to sound. We set the whole system up, and I'm there with Sean listening, just doing the sound check in the course of the afternoon before a bunch of guests were arriving for the evening. And for a brief period, we were playing the Abbey Road record, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty special thing, listening to the album Abbey Road in Abbey Road Studio 2, where it was originally recorded. Then Sean said, "Do you want a coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, great." He steps out, and I'm literally by myself now in that space, listening to those speakers and that record. And I will confess, I had a little sing, because, you know, you take that opportunity, right? Why wouldn't you? And I can't claim to be a great singer, but, you know. Anyway, I'm dimly aware of this voice joining in, singing along with me. And I just naturally assumed it was Sean, right? And I turned around, and it was Paul McCartney.
Oh my God.
I swear.
That's crazy.
So for like, 15 seconds, I'm just like the goldfish. Like, just can't speak. And he just literally said, "I guess I should have been involved with this, shouldn't I?" And just walked out the door. Just like, boom, gone.
That's great.
Unbelievable.
Oh, man.
So that's a claim to fame, right?
That's something you'll always remember, man. That's a great experience. Sure. Great story. Appreciate you sharing it. I'm going to tell you, I tend to favor the odd albums of bands. Like, for example, I think my favorite Beatles album is Rubber Soul, even though it's not the most popular. I just like some of the abstract songs on that. Kind of like Pink Floyd. My favorite album from Pink Floyd is not Dark Side of the Moon, although I love it, but it's Animals.
Okay.
I just like the whole listen from start to finish kind of concept. And like with Genesis, a lot of people think, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is their best album, but I think Trick of the Tail is, because musically that's where they were at their peak, and they've got some incredible melodies on that album. So I don't always go with the popular albums for my favorite for the bands, but everybody has different tastes, and I celebrate the entire collection regardless.
I think that's one of the reasons why we all like this, though, right, Gene? I think that's the thing. I mean, if everybody liked the same thing, it'd be boring.
Yep.
And that's half the fun of also discovering not only new albums by artists that you're already aware of, but also clearly, completely new performers. You want to kind of come to that buzz where you think, hey, I've got something special that nobody else knows about, or hey, I've just uncovered an experience that nobody else has had.
So I'm going to tell you about a new artist that you could use as demo material on your speakers, because she sounds absolutely amazing. I just did a live stream with her about a week and a half ago. Her name is Dominique Fils-Aimé.
Yeah, we know her very well. Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, she's just got an incredible sound, very smooth, very sultry. The production quality on her stuff is incredible.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a particular cut I like, Birds, if you know that one.
Yeah. That's the demo one. That's the money song for sure.
It's amazing. It's an amazing piece. The space within it, right? It's huge.
Yeah, I got to remind him to put that in my system before you leave.
Oh, yeah.
And then Phil, if you throw that through the Dolby Up mixer and you turn center spread on, which I'm glad you guys brought center spread back to your products. Appreciate that. You turn center spread on and you put it on with the Dolby Up mixer, and it sounds like you're listening to Atmos. I mean, it's that the layering of her vocals, it works really well in those upmix decoders, and it's just incredible. So guys, again, check out Dominique Fils-Aimé. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just really enthusiastic, not only because her sound quality or audiophile grade level recordings, but it's music you actually want to listen to, and it's new and it's fresh, and I hope to see more coming from her in the future. So I want to talk about speakers.
Yes, and we have lots of. Andy is like Mr. Wizard over here. He has all sorts of little parts that we can actually go through, because a lot of the magic that has made that new speaker special is behind the curtain. So he wants to show you that stuff.
So let me set this up for a minute, because one of my favorite trips, I love visiting manufacturers, and I have to tell you, one of my favorite trips in the last 10 years is when you guys flew me out to unveil the 800D3 series, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. Yeah. And you set up, I think there were 802s. You set up 5 of them in a room, and no subwoofers, and you sat there and you played Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon SACD or DVD audio. I think it was SACD.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there. I'm like, this isn't going to work because you don't have subs. You know, you're not going to get good bass distribution in the room. And then I shut up real quickly when I heard how amazing the sound was, how immersive it was. And even though I've heard Dark Side of the Moon a million times to the point where I don't want to hear it again because I want to throw up, I was captivated. It was like listening for the first time again. And you guys did such an incredible job with that demo. And it really made me take notice of those speakers because there was some seriously good audio chops I was hearing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that, first and foremost. Yeah, I vividly remember doing that. Yeah, it was 800s all the way around as well. It was a big deal. It was the first time any of us, me included, had actually heard 5 800s in one space. We were as excited about it as you were. And it worked really, really well. The track was great. Yeah, SACD. That was Doug Henderson's period of time as well. He did a great job of like bringing out that recording for us. And yeah, I think we all thoroughly enjoyed the day.
Yeah, it was great time. And I guess what I'm wondering is the speakers were already at an incredible level in fidelity, just hearing all the demos. What have you done in the last 3 or 4 years to basically cause a revision change? Because Bowers and Wilkins doesn't change their flagship series too often. So it's unusual, in my opinion, that you guys have made a new series change in just a couple of years. What happened? What's the deal?
Well, first off, let's talk about timescales because it's typically 5 to 6 years, and I know kind of time flies, right? I mean that the 800 D3, that series, originated in 2015. The specific model, the 800, came out in 2016, which is when you came for your listening experience. So we are actually, 5 years ago, 6 years ago in the case of the original series. Just time,
lose track of time.
Exactly right. Listen, I think the key thing is this. It's about trying to create a kind of more believable illusion, right? I think if you to summarize it, that's what we're trying to do. The target is always trying to make a speaker sound less like a speaker. And obviously the end game from that is trying to make the performance more believable. Right. So it's removing obstructions to realism, obstructions to transparency. And we can talk about that in a bit. These are things like the transducer work that we've done. And it's also about removing the sense of the audibility of the cabinet. And that's about the sound that the cabinet generates itself, so how it radiates energy as it's operating, and also about its acoustic form. So if you look straight from the get-go at the cabinet, you might think there's a lot of similarity there. Actually, subsurface, there's a ton of things that are changed. As also you start to look closer at the primary forms, particularly things like the tweeter body on top, you'll notice that that's also evolved a lot too. So it's evolution. We actually have this line where we talk about the evolution of excellence. It's evolutionary in most regards, trying to make what was already a pretty good speaker. Thank you for saying so, by the way, but a good speaker better. But at the same time, we have also got one really big and fundamental, completely new technology, which we're very proud to debut in 800 series, and it will obviously cascade into other products going forward from us as well.
So can we expect to see revision changes on the 700 and 600 series because of what you've done now on the 800 series?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's always what we try and do, right, Gene? So, I mean, if you go back to the last iteration and the 700 series followed up a couple of years later, if you'll recall, and again, it incorporated some technologies and some thinking like the continuum mid-range cone and mid-bass cone that we developed for 800 series. The same's true here. I'm not going to give you a time scale because, of course, we're talking about future technologies. But the same's absolutely true here. Some of the things that we're going to discuss today are obviously making their debut in the 800 series diamond, but you can fully expect to see them in the 700 series and other models going forward.
Gotcha. I will tell you this much. I have a pair of the 704 S3s. I think they're S3, the newest ones. I think they're S3. I get confused on the series.
They would be the two, the S2. Yeah.
I'm sorry, S2. So I got the 704 S2s in a guest room right now. I'm about ready to shoot a video on them. And they're a way smaller speaker than they look in the photos, right? They're tiny. For a floor-standing speaker, they're really small. I remember unboxing them. I'm like, I'm not expecting much out of such a small speaker. Put it in that room. Didn't listen to them for like 6 months. They just sat there. Then I recently hooked up the Denon A110, integrated amplifier, which incidentally got our product of the year award for integrated amps because I just love that amplifier. Hooked it up, turned on an SACD, Patricia Barber, Cafe Blue. And I just sat there with my mouth just kind of open. I'm like, I can't believe you're getting, first of all, this much real bass extension out of these tiny little drivers. And the fact that I'm sitting above the tweeter height, because I have like a day bed in there for guests. I'm like, the treble presence was a little forward, but it was incredibly airy. It sounded like I was listening to an AMT tweeter. And what really sucked me into that speaker was the mid-range was just really sounded real to me. And I had one of your competitors over at my place helping me tune my theater system. And he sat down in that room and he listened to them. And we had some expensive bookshelf speakers from another brand that were double the price. He goes, I prefer the Bowers and Wilkins. Like, these speakers, they sound better than they should. They're, pretty reasonably priced. They look great. They're small. So I was really impressed. I can't wait to do that video. But I do want to ask you a difficult question that's been on my mind. It's been on the mind of some of the people, like, just people that do measurements. One thing that I noticed about your speakers, whether it's the 700 series or the 800 series, when we do measurements on your speakers, they're not as flat as some of your competitors. There's always like a 2 kilohertz notch. Yeah. And now some companies will say that's bad. You shouldn't have that. Everything should be flat. You should have on and off axis equal response with the tapered off. You guys aren't really following so much that target Harman curve.
Correct.
But yet your stuff sounds great. So what do you guys know, or what's your approach that's different from virtually everybody that buys into this camp of flat on-axis response and meeting a certain listening window? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Because we do get asked that a lot. You're right to say it. I think we're not necessarily tuning to meet any specific requirement, whether it's the Harman or any other. We work on pretty established ways. The methodologies are kind of going back for some decades now. In fact, our chief acoustic engineer pretty much started his time at the company 6 months before John Bowers died. So that's 1987, mid 1987. And the knowledge and the approach and the way of doing things have kind of cascaded from him through the various other people that work within the team. So we like to think we've been doing it pretty much that same way right from the get-go, right from the outset of the company. And yes, fully accept it's not necessarily lined up to a specific flat approach. It's about what we like. We're trying to make what we think we will enjoy, and hopefully that will be something that the listener will then enjoy too. So I would say you're right. If you were to measure them, you might find areas where you're thinking there's a notch, areas where you're thinking there's a dip, areas where I'm not perfect. But it translates into listenability. It translates into something that is as revealing and as accurate as we think it should be to the original recording, because obviously that's hugely important. But at the same time, it's also just sounds like a Bowers and Wilkins speaker. One thing I think you will hopefully agree with, and I know you've heard lots of our products over the years, is there is that consistency, right? I mean, you can step from a mid-price to a premium price to a more affordable price. And of course, there are differences. There have to be. But at the same time, it's recognizably us. I think that would be a fair comment.
Yeah, I got you. I understand. I definitely think that there is a British sound or European sound to speakers. I think there is. You could almost tell when you're listening to a European speaker versus an American speaker. I still think there's some tonal differences, and I think some of that has to do with the room acoustics in Europe versus here, because there's a lot of brick there and a lot of cinder block there. So I think there's definitely something to that, and I'm not faulting you guys for it, because I know there's objectivists out there that only listen to speakers with measurements, and I'm not one of those people. I like to measure a speaker to make sure there's nothing glaringly wrong, like a driver out of phase or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I really value the listening test, doing the measurements after doing the listening test, because if you do the measurements first, you're going to be biased to think the speaker is good or bad just by looking at a couple of curves. And I think that's a wrong approach.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think, look, I mean, as I say, we are going to change. And I don't mean that again to sound, that's not meant to sound hostile, because it's clearly not. It's just that's the Bowers and Wilkins way, right? So I fully recognize there will be some people who will not like it and will refuse, therefore, to engage with the products because they believe what they believe, and they're entitled to, and that's fine. Sure. And we respect that too. But this is how we make our products, and it will be continuing the way that we make our products for so long as basically there are guys around who kind of know the Bowers and Wilkins way, when we are all still there. So
yep. I want to show you a couple of comments here, and then we'll move on to your presentation. One here, flat doesn't always mean best for everyone. I like that comment. That's good. This person here has got the 603s, loves the Continuum drivers. Excellent, epic experience there. That's good. Somebody's saying you guys are giving away a pair of 801s. I don't know. I didn't hear that.
I think that's a little peer pressure right there.
Maybe 805s. I don't know about 801s. And then they got another 802 user here, front and home center, 803 backs along with. So that's a nice system. Wow, 4 decent Atmos. Yeah, awesome. All right, so Andy, I'm going to turn this over to you so you could kind of give us a little show and tell. I know you got some props you want to show us, and then maybe you could kind of give us a rundown of the upgrades for the 808, the D4 series over the D3, so we understand that better.
Well, okay, let's start with the transducers, because I think that's where one of the biggest single, if you like, revolutionary changes comes forward, which is in the back end of the mid-range cone. So you'll recall last time around we changed from a material that at Bowers and Wilkins we now have to refer to as the polyaromatic aramid fiber. It's that yellow material that gets used in flak jackets, so you will know it up. We no longer have the licensing rights to use that name because it's not our material, so we don't use it. We obviously changed in the last generation to the Continuum cone. Now, Continuum was something that we initiated in 2007 as an R&D project. You recall, I think, the last presentations that we did together, we said, this was 7 years in development and around 70 iterations. And frankly, our chief of research at the time kind of lost count after that, but it still took a lot of time to get it right. That was the big innovation in 2015, and then we cascaded that pretty quickly through 2017 in the 700 series, and then through 2018 in the 600 series, and it's now in everything that we do in that cabinet range of loudspeakers. We've also rolled it into our installed models in 700 and 800 series as well.
And I think it's important to note that back in the day when you were using that yellow driver that we can't name the name of, we didn't have as sophisticated design tools on computers as we do now with finite element analysis, for example. So you guys could really look into the resonant structures of the cone material, the geometry of the cones. You're doing stuff you couldn't do 2 decades ago. Wouldn't you agree with that?
100% right. And I think that we use a FEA package called COMSOL Multiphysic. And it's a very powerful tool. It helps us kind of really understand the behavior of structures at a very microscopic level and throughout a frequency range in the case of something like a cone or a moving component part. So we can do a lot of work very quickly, and we can also do things virtually. So you can simulate a lot before you even get to that rapid prototyping stage. I remember the sort of physical days of prototyping, and SRE was kind of full of physical cabinets because that's how you did things, right? And it was just very much more, if you like, structural way. For the 2015 800 series, there were 3-4 physical cabinets that were mules, and all the rest of it was done using simulation and 3D modeling before we even got to the requirement to actually make parts. It made things a lot quicker, but also a lot more efficient. Anyway, look, so the Continuum cone was that big thing. Now, I think the best way to view it now, Gene, is once you've got that level of noise out of the mid-range cone, out of the system, it starts to shine a spotlight on other areas that, again, we hadn't previously been kind of aware of. As a parallel path to Continuum, we had been investigating the output, the noise from the spider at the back of the mid-range cone. And actually, we'd initiated a patent application 2 years before the Continuum one, around 2005, for a new technology and a new approach to developing a spider, a suspension system. And again, roughly the same kind of period of time we got the approval through, and it just took us even longer than it did with Continuum to essentially productionize it, to work out how to make it. But this is the big change that we've introduced in the new system. So look, if you think about a regular cone, obviously this right here is a regular cone. Clearly, you've got the drive unit at the front of the system, and at the back of the system around here, in most all cones, including our more affordable loudspeakers and our last generation, we would have a regular fabric spider, a kind of thing like this. It's been used like this for generations, right? That's a standard fabric spider. And what it does is 2 functions. Of course, it's centering the voice coil in the magnetic gap. So it's making sure that the coil's not rocking forwards and backwards, which is fundamental. And at the same time, of course, it's providing a bit of suspension compliance. So If the cone at the front is moving, depending on how it's structured, it's typically got a roll surround. In the case of our FST mid-range, it doesn't. It's restrained, but nonetheless, the same system works. So the cone at the front's moving, and the suspension's moving.
Yeah, it's like a spring.
You got it. Now, this actually produces output. It actually has its own output in terms of noise, basically. Now, of course, it's behind the cone, not in front of the cone, so arguably it's less transparent and less obvious. And of course, in older generations of cone, because the material type was noisy, we weren't necessarily detecting, measuring, or being overly concerned by that output. But as we moved through to Continuum, we started to find ourselves getting more concerned by it, if you like, because by removing other areas of noise in front of the system, this little guy here was becoming more audible. So this right here is the replacement. So you can see away, right? It's a much more open structure.
It doesn't have a surface area to radiate sound.
Exactly that. So basically, you've got an inner ring which is doing that same function as before. So it's restraining the voice coil, stopping that rocking. If you look real close, you can see that there's actually a kind of profiled edge to the legs that form it, which are the shape of a bird's wing. And that's where we like names that kind of reflect technologies. This is where the name comes from, biomimetic. So it's mimicking a form in nature, in this particular case, the shape of a wing, and then using that to provide an optimal combination of low pressure upwards and stiffness laterally. Stiffness laterally is important.
You probably get better venting out of the voice coil by not having that area blocked by the conventional spider, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's one of many advantages that you get with it. But the biggest single one is that lack of output off the surface area of this. At around 4 kilohertz, this is around 25 dB quieter than a standard fabric equivalent spider. At 1K, it's around 80 dB quieter.
Wow. Now, do you guys have a patent on that? Because I've never seen a surround like that.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Freaking, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, this is a fundamental thing. Again, this is partially why it took a bunch of time, right? Some things to clarify for the benefit of the guys watching in. It only works at the moment on mid-range cones. The amount of deflection required to make it work on a mid-bass cone or of course a bass cone will be greater.
Too much travel. Yeah,
you got it. So
but it's more, you're more sensitive at mid-range frequencies anyway. So who cares if the bass drivers aren't? You know, it's more important for the mid-range driver than the bass driver.
Something for us to do for the next generation, right? We've got something else to work upon. But it's a huge step change, and if you couple it up to the other things that we've done working through the mid-range cone in terms of transducer tech, the outcome is just an audible improvement in, as you said, in that mid-range transparency and that sense of hearing into the music, right?
One thing I'm wondering though, if you said the spider is actually producing its own acoustical energy, the conventional spider, do you lose some sensitivity going to this kind of spider? Do you lose a half a dB or a dB of sensitivity as a result?
A little, but not enough to cause a major problem for us, and we can bring that back in other ways. So all the motor systems are completely re-optimized, and they're all new in terms of their configuration. We're now using a double copper shorting ring on the motor. So on the more affordable systems on the pole, you've got a double copper cap, just giving us some more, basically some more shove by lowering the inductance on the system. And then on the 801, on this guy here, we have a silver cap, just cleaner even still. So massively lower, again, distortion through that lower part of the mid, and a cleaner output overall. That alongside some other work that we've done in terms of the magnets and the motor system within the magnets is kind of bringing back any potential losses that you might have. So the outcome is it's pretty much the same figure, and we win everywhere else in terms of transparency.
Gotcha. So that seems like one of the biggest changes in the D4. Tweeter wise, is that pretty much the same carryover from the last one, or did you do any changes on the tweeter?
Still haven't managed to improve the dome, but everything else is completely new. So this right here is the new solid body tweeter assembly. Now you'll notice it's a fair bit longer than the previous construction. This is 12 inches, 30 centimeters, pretty much 2 kilos. So I guess approaching 5 pounds.
Wow.
It's a milled from solid piece as before. You remember that from the last time round.
Yep.
The longer tube length really helps because basically it's lowering the FS along the length of the tube.
Right.
broadly similar in principle to what you have with a Nautilus, right? So because of that, we can actually take one of the magnets out. So it's now a 2-motor, not a 3-motor system. We can open up and let the kind of back of the motor breathe more. So we're getting more output again spatially, and the dome's just behaving clean, even though it's the same dome.
So you could lower the crossover frequency
Exactly
on the tweeter a little
so
bit.
you can you can really bring that. It's a lot. You're spot on, Gene. It's a lot easier for you to listen into that transparent point between the lower end of the HF and the upper end of the mid, and you don't hear the motor systems really at all. It becomes a much more cohesive thing. Other big part of this that we really wanted to work on, and again, some of you guys will remember this, if you go to the last generation, you had a single point locator rod here and a tail stick decoupling point there. The new one has a new decoupling system. If you guys can see in there are 2 machine slots, one here, and this is a steel post. It's an L-shaped post. You can see how it sits in that hole in there and that hole in there, right? But it has, if you can look there, you can see it's got like a compliant mounting. This is actually a soft compressible damping material. If you guys can see my thumb rocking on that.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So this locates in here at those 2 points, and it provides that decoupling for this whole mass. So this whole mass is now floating in a kind of rigidly locked 2-point system. It's no longer possible for you to lift the tailpipe up like you could in the last generation. And as a result, it's more repeatable. And as a result of that, we can come downwards in the decoupling frequency. So in the old model, we were around the 75, 80K mark. It can come right down. It's like 23, 24 just K hertz. Sorry, I'm not, forgive me, that's jet lag talking. 80 hertz rather than 80 kilohertz, excuse me, so sorry.
Yeah, no.
Now we bring the now we're down at the kind of 23, 24 hertz mark. So the decoupling's just working way better.
It's kind of similar. It reminds me of how they build the superstructures in other countries, where the for better rigidity against hurricanes and earthquakes, the building kind of is on its own suspension system, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's completely
right.
rigid. Right. Yeah, and it's probably good because you have a rigid cabinet to begin with. You don't want to put 2 rigid surfaces on top of each other without a dampening material in between them.
Exactly that, and you'll know already, right? I mean, there's a ton of decoupling running through the whole system, Gene. So this is a big deal in the sense of, you think about that low frequency enclosure. You've got a pair, in the case of an 801, you've got a pair of 10-inch systems in there, right? So there's a lot of energy going through that. We have to make sure that doesn't run upwards through the enclosure into the top of the cabinet. The other big part on that one, if I have this right here, excuse me, reach down there and grab it. Is all of the tops of the speakers, including the big guy right behind me, have British aluminium.
I like that.
Aluminium.
I like the way he says it.
Aluminium top plate. So this top casting now bolts to the top of the system. It has a couple of benefits. It actually stiffens up the top of the cabinet. It helps reduce that unwanted upward transfer of resonance from the lower part, the low frequency enclosure, upwards into the mid or the HF. Yeah. What it also provides, as you guys can see right here, see these notches right here? Yeah. These are the perfect locator points for those decouplings. You see how they slot right into those 2 points? So what that means is, depending on model, you get a really good metal contact, which is obviously very repeatable and very durable for the decoupling system. And again, that makes the predictability about how the decoupling works that much more repeatable fundamentally. So the whole thing gives us less audibility around the mid-range or around the HF, depending on the model.
And that's also
now, what's that star pattern? What's that star pattern by the threaded inserts? What's the point of that?
It's just about structural bracing. Yeah, exactly. Like, sorry, Phil. He made a great point as well. But that's exactly it. It's just about bracing, because otherwise, of course, this is a weak point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Metal, right? So it's providing a bit of stiffness to take that back. Phil raised a great question there.
Yeah. So if you look at one of the things you'll see about the new D4s versus the prior model, you see that there's like the leather along the top, and that is because it sits in here, correct?
Exactly that. Yes. So this obviously mechanically, structurally is the top surface. Aesthetically, it's not. If you look inside, you can see this lip edge here is the bit that you see.
You can see back,
and then sitting in here, there's a carrier, which is just a plastic carrier, and that provides the form for the leather top. We're using leather by Connolly. Some of you guys might be familiar with that brand. It's a very British brand for leather. They once upon a time used to make the leather for the seats in the Spitfire fighter plane. They still make the leather for a lot of premium British cars. The seats in the House of Lords are made. It's that kind of stuff, right?
Nice.
So it works great. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, Gene, and say that there is nothing about that is anything acoustic.
It just looks beautiful.
It just looks nice.
Hey, it's an audio furniture that sounds good.
Yeah,
exactly.
And looks good.
Exactly. But everything around it is wrapped right for acoustics there.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of your design philosophy. So when you look at any of your speakers, obviously the big thing about Bowers and Wilkins, you're all about decoupling, isolating the mid-range, getting the tweeter out of the cabinet. I understand all the theory that you guys have behind that. What are your thoughts about waveguides? Because obviously you don't have a lot of waveguides going on your tweeter to match directivity of the mid-range. Is that just not as big of a concern to you as much as dealing with the resonances of the cabinets? Or, have you looked at putting a waveguide on the tweeter? I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, I mean, in times past, if you recall, that back in the mid-90s, there was a waveguide used in one of the earlier generation 600 series right at the start. So it's something that we tried at different times. We keep going back to the kind of more, if you like, more conventional forms on domes, and then we just prefer to deal with it another way. One of the things you kind of highlighted it yourself earlier on that we look for is that sense of trying to get the system to get out of the cabinet as best as we possibly can, right? So in that 704 that you have at home right now, the whole tweeter assembly it's encapsulated in a kind of low shore hardness rubber sheath, which kind of houses the whole thing and then completely couples it into the baffle, and sort of the whole system floats as best as you can. That's trying to reduce that unwanted radiated energy from the HF going into the structure and allowing some of it to come out into the room. So we tend to prefer that kind of approach. As you also know, I'm sure we've discussed this a bunch of times, we tend to use a similar kind of philosophy, but a different materiality depending on the level of product as far as the HF approaches. So they're all Pistonic. They're all stiff in different ways. We have in the past used soft domes of different types. We still have some soft domes in some of our CT products, CT700, but most of our product is Pistonic. It's stiff. Whether again it's aluminium, for 600 series, or the carbon dome for 700 series, or obviously the diamond diaphragm in the case of the 800 series. So in general, most of the time, most of the cones that we use are related and similar. And obviously the only things that we really flex are the material approaches, depending on, the level of the product, price point of the product.
Gotcha. We got a good endorsement over here from a fellow N803 user. Fell in love with them, heard of 802Ds. I have those now. Mind blowing that these little lose a little resale value. That's a good point. One thing that I always liked about your speakers is they do hold their value because it's audio equipment is usually not a good investment. But if you have some brand like Bowers and Wilkins or Macintosh, those kind of brands, Class A, those kind of brands hold their value because they do have a very loyal following of audiophiles for decades. It's not just like you guys have been around for 10 or 20 years. We're talking 50.
Yeah, exactly.
50
and
years?
I think it's a great point. It's one of those things that obviously, the world that we all move in, right? I mean, there's a ton of consumer electronics components that people buy that within 2-3 years are out of date and
disposable.
And look at smart TVs and smartphones as just two great examples. But
well, you brought up a point earlier about the fact that when Gene was talking about the dip or the curve and how there's a Bowers sound.
Yeah.
And because of that, even though it evolves, it still maintains the Bowers sound. It's almost like if you look at a Porsche.
Yeah.
There's a character, the way the motor sounds, where it's located, the way that it handles. So you may not be able to achieve or get the newest Porsche, but you still can get a lot of that experience if you buy an older model.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it allows people to step into Bowers by maybe buying an older generation and then work their way up in the family. But regardless of the generation you buy, you get that Bowers experience, and that means it retains its value. So it isn't like you said. It's not just revolutionary. It's this, how'd you call it? As not even evolutionary. You had another term for it you used earlier, but it's more of an evolutionary approach. It's a subtle advancement and fine tuning of something to make it better and better and better.
I mean, I think it's a great point, right? And I also think one of the things that I'd add, the brand, every brand that you just mentioned, I completely agree with. I think, you know, Lin and Name Audio in the UK would be two other great examples. Is most responsible brands that have pedigree in this category across the different areas, and every brand you mentioned, I agree with, by the way. They retain some degree of expertise and support for older products, even if they no longer manufacture them. Now, we, and I know other brands do this, will maintain support and parts for 10 years after you buy something. So 10 years, we guarantee that we'll be able to get you something. It might take a while under current circumstances, but we do that. After that, it's less likely, but if you really need it, we can fabricate stuff. And I've seen that, right? I've seen people who have 1972, 1973 Bowers Wilkins loudspeakers that they still love, that they still use. And, you know, the factories fabricated new systems for them to go in to try and, you know, bring them back up to speed. And I think that also helps add to that that resale value element, that durability element.
You know what they call a 2-year smartphone, right?
A paperweight.
Obsolete.
Yeah.
Obsolete. And you know, those are $1,000 phones now. So when you look at it and you think about it, when you're spending this kind of money on loudspeakers, it's really this kind of a purchase it's almost like a speaker for life. I know I shouldn't say that myself because I'm always upgrading, because that's the nature of what I do. But one of your core audience, you know, someone that really has loved your company for years and wants to get a pair of 800 803 D4s, that's probably something they're going to keep a good 10, 20 years or more, and then maybe even hand it over to their children. You know, it's just one of those kind of things that you're not just buying something you're going to throw away in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that's also a great way to look at it as well in terms of the whole life cost, right? I mean, you know, like a house, you know, you amortize it, right? You view it as something that, you know, fine, the initial cost of ownership's a hit, but then I'm going to get value off it for 10 years, actually per annum. That's not necessarily the scariest amount of outlay. So I think also, let's be honest, this is the other thing. You buy these because you want them. You know, you don't need them, you want them, right? This is something that makes your life better. And why not spend a bit of money on something like that?
Yeah. We got a question here about support, since we're talking about that. It's very hard to order replacement parts for the classic 800 series. Do we have any relief in sight? Is that because of a supply chain issue, or is it just because it's an older model that you're not supporting anymore?
It's a combination of both things. And again, I want to apologize for that, because it is, hopefully most of the guys on this call will know, it's not necessarily how we've always done things. I think the company has been struggling to kind of meet demand for our new 800 series diamond product, and the build plan has been insane. And yes, we have undoubtedly also had a few changes over the last 18, 24 months in some of the processes caused by COVID, caused by everything else. I don't want to fall back on that like it's a cheesy excuse, but it's just the reality, right? So we're doing our best to kind of bring that up to speed, because it's not how we like to roll. We definitely want to make sure that we can fix it, and please bear with us. We'll do our best.
Gotcha. Cool. Are there any other enhancements you want to talk about with the D4 series? Because I know we kind of went off topic a little bit. We covered the cabinet. We covered the cabinet upgrades a little bit. We covered, obviously, that the biggest thing from my mind was that suspension upgrade for the mid-range driver. And then, of course, you've upgraded the tube for the tweeter. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about that makes it a D4?
Yeah, I mean, the cabinet and the structure, beyond all the stuff that we've mentioned on motor systems, I think the cabinet and the structure continues to evolve. The 805 and the 804, and also the smaller 5-inch center channel, the HGM82, now flip to a new cabinet orientation. So you guys will recall back in 2015, we introduced this new form we call the reverse wrap, where basically the structure of the older generation was reoriented so that you now have, rather than the curvature in the back of the product and a flat front, you flip that around, you reverse it, and the whole front of the loudspeaker system is one continuous piece of bent wood, with the drive units mounted right at the heart of that, at essentially the stiffest part of the structure. And what we try to do is bring the back of the speaker in as close as we possibly can, so you get that kind of form, and that means the distance between those 2 points at the back of the loudspeaker is minimal, as short as possible, and that allows us to stiffen up the whole system and make it quieter. Now, we did that on 803, 802, and 800 at that time. We didn't do it on the smaller models, and that was simply partially just a question of new tooling and time. The great thing I think we've been able to do this time around is kind of bring the other models into that as well. And I think one thing I'd urge you, as somebody who's experienced in listening to these products, to do is take some time to try the 805 and the 804, because these are really transformed. They're not physically bigger. I think that same point you made about the 704 applies to the 804 compared to some of the big towers, including the products that we produce. It's a fairly compact design, but it sounds transformed compared to the preceding generation.
I mean, since you're offering it, I'd like to get a pair of 804 D4s in here. I mean, definitely would like to check those out for sure. So
yeah, I mean, that new structure really helps you, and it takes them it makes them go a lot deeper. I mean, again, Phil, he's spent a lot of time listening to them, so I'll let him speak to them as well. But yeah, they sound audibly less like a loudspeaker cabinet because of the way that they're formed. They now have an aluminium plate on the inside front behind that curvature, kind of bolstering the system. They now have a downward firing port onto a plinth rather than a forward firing port. They now have a rear mounted crossover, just like their bigger brothers.
See, and I like the downward firing port for two reasons. Number one, when you put a port on the bottom like that, it acts as basically as a low pass filter, so you don't hear any kind of fluttering, or you don't hear any chuffing if there's any at all. Also, you couple it closer to the floor itself, so you can get a potential little boost in bass there. And I was looking at the 804 D4 specs, and that's impressive for such a small speaker to have a 3 dB point of 24 hertz. Usually speakers of that, usually speakers of that size maybe play down to 30, maybe 27, 28, but those things are tuned pretty low. You probably wouldn't need a subwoofer in a medium-sized room if you're listening to 2-channel, if you're getting that kind of bass extension out of it.
Well, as I say, you speak to them, because
I will tell you that, because when I got that first pair of 804s, first thing is, it's kind of funny. They're, like you said, Gene, they're smaller than what you think when you first take them out of the box, but they're heavier.
They are heavy. Yeah,
you're like, is this thing made out of concrete? You know, when I first took them out of the box. But the fit and finish, of course, and then we set them up in one of our smaller showrooms. And like I said, I was absolutely stunned. And every time we do demos for them, people are absolutely stunned at the bass performance of a speaker of that size. The other thing too is the finish, the new finish that I'm sure you'll talk about. That white, that walnut.
The walnut. Yeah,
the walnut finish is absolutely stunning. And when you look at the design of the speaker, it's like a piece of furniture. Like you mentioned, the leather, the Connolly leather is there to make it look beautiful. And it's something. These are going to be a focal point in your room. And that speaker is just flat out gorgeous. It fits in any space, and the performance is just outstanding.
One thing
you got a lot of Bowers and Wilkins owners here in this live stream. That's awesome to see that.
How often do you get to talk to Andy? You know,
right? That's awesome.
One thing I want to add to that, thank you by the way for that, Phil. It's very kind of you. Is this is the plinth for an 804, right? You will recall, Gene, we went going back to the preceding generation. All of the earlier models had a zinc aluminium alloy plinth. The only model that had an all aluminium plinth was the largest one, the 800. On the new generation, all of them are aluminium plinths, and they all have constrained layer damping. So you can see there's a steel plate here, which is then separated by an isolating decoupling mat, which runs under here as a structure, and then it's screwed and bolted in place to kind of couple it up. So it creates, this is a metal structure.
Yeah,
and
it's very
it creates something that's pretty inert, right?
Inert,
and the other part of that, of course, to your point about the plinth, is we've got a really nice kind of fixed acoustic constant now. It's the difference between the output of the port right here and this plinth, and because this plinth is as inert as it is, we get a very clean sound. The one other thing I want to draw people's attention to is these. We used to have M6. None of us were ever satisfied with that, and the new models are on these big M12s.
That is a manly spot.
That's a serious piece, right?
That is a serious. Wow.
And the great thing about that, of course, is you're getting a much better kind of more controlled connection. It's metal on metal contact, so it's not going to shear. All those sorts of things. So we get some big uplifts just by having this on an 804. And it's a great piece as a result of that. I'd say it's one of my favorite speakers for the reason that it surprises people, exactly as Phil said.
So what's interesting about all of this decoupling that you're doing with this plinth, we just did a review of the ISO acoustics, the Gia, or I don't even know how to say it right, but
the Gia, like the little couplers.
Yep. So it offers incredible results from what our reviewer said, Teo Nikolakis, but those are like $1,000. So you're basically you're building that into your own speakers. I mean, would you say you almost don't even need something like that because you already have this built into the plinth and everything else you're doing there?
No, I mean, I've heard the guys, and I actually think that there's something in it. I mean, it depends very much on your floor and your room, and I think it's one of those things where, depending on the house that you have, it's still worth trying. I think it's one of those technologies that works. I'll give them their great credit. They've spent a lot of time working on it properly. I think they're beautifully engineered as well. By the way,
are incredible.
As a piece of, it feels like a piece of audio jewelry, right? So try it and see. I mean, we clearly, as you know, the big guys have even bigger spikes, right? We spend a lot of time working on that kind of thing because we recognize, these are big, heavy systems, as Phil said, and you want to get them stable. You want to get that result because we really want to encourage people to set them up properly. It makes such a difference, right? So, fine.
Yeah, so that's not to interrupt you, but there are people that, you open a Bowers Wilkins speaker and we lost your video. Oh, there you go.
Go back.
So I've seen installations of the 700 series and some of the 800s where they don't put the plinth in. They just put the spikes in the speaker and set it down. I mean, honestly, can you say that there's an audible benefit to using the plinth? It's not just cosmetic. It's not just for stability of knocking the speaker over. Would you always recommend using the plinth if people can just take the step and install them?
It's the other way around, Gene. On the 800s, the plinth is structural, it's integral, it's non-removable, and you have to use it. On the 700s and the 600s, it's optional.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
And we provide it to comply with legal regulations around tilt test. So acoustically, and if you are trying to get the best result acoustically, and also, I want to be clear about this, you feel safe and comfortable with it as a choice yourself, then the best result comes from not using the plinth. And here's why. The mass of the system goes straight down onto those 4 spike output points at the bottom of the body enclosure. When you bolt the plinth in, you're then creating a slight cantilever where the plinth takes the spikes outboard of those mass points going straight up through the bottom of the loudspeaker. So mechanically, you're not grounding the speaker to the floor quite as well. Now, obviously, it's something that you do by choice because what it does is it takes the footprint of the speaker out, and it means it's harder to knock it over. So if you have small children or a large dog or a combination of the two, and you have in any way any concerns about somebody running into your tower and knocking it over, that's why we put it in the box. But it's also, to be clear, why we don't necessarily spend a ton of time on making it out of a more exotic material or whatever else, because it's not the same as a plinth on an 800. A plinth on an 800 is a structural component. On a 6 or a 7, it's an option to make sure that we are doing the right thing by the customer from a safety protocol point of view. But at the same time, if you don't feel that you need that, then just put the spike straight into the bottom of the speaker, because the mass just goes straight down, and that's the right way to do it.
Or you could get an outrigger system, an aftermarket outrigger system, and I really like outriggers, to be honest with you. I think they look cool and they add a lot of stability to a tall, skinny tower.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it depends on how they're engineered, but I think that point about even the best engineered outrigger systems are still taking, to a degree, the mass of the system and placing it outside the center of mass still applies. It just, if they're well engineered, they're probably coping with it better than some other systems.
Gotcha. So you wanted to go over the finish options on the D4s. You said there were like 3 or 4 different finishes. If you want to just go over that real quick.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that we really wanted to do, and we had a lot of requests over the course of the past 15 years, if I'm honest with you, Gene, is to try and get to as raw a wood finish, a walnut finish as we could. The reason why we couldn't do it in the preceding iteration is, if you guys recall, the top of the speaker was of a painted or wood finish surface. And then it met the upright element of the veneer running down the side of the cabinet. So you had a veneer join. Now, when you cut a veneer, even if you're cutting it really well, there's a very strong chance that you'll flake some of that veneer. What we were able to do with the rose nut finish loudspeaker, of course, because it's a walnut that then has a hit of red on it to create that rose nut color, is there's a paint fill, and that paint fill takes away any of those slight concerns about how those two joints come together. The minute you no longer have that paint in raw walnut, you would see the cracks in the veneer, and clearly that's not acceptable, and we didn't want that to happen, hence the fact that preceding generations were not offered with the walnut veneer. We did a couple of experiments late in life, some people will recall seeing them, on how to make it work, and we still didn't feel we ever got it quite right. Now, the great thing about the new models, going back right here to that top that we had before, is you can see there's this edge, and this edge sits on the top of the cabinet, whether it's on the model you can see behind me or here, and what it does is it relieves the top of that veneer. You can't see the top of that veneer because it's covered over by that metal edge. Now, what that means is now, for the first time, we're able to offer a pretty much raw walnut finish. So basically, it's an American walnut. It's a beautiful piece of wood. It gets 2 hits of a fairly matte lacquer. We don't want it to kind of wind up too glossy.
Yeah.
And if you get the chance, and Phil will tell you as well, you run your hand down it and you can feel the open grain of the wood. You can feel the warmth of the wood. It's a very romantic feeling, beautiful feeling kind of material. And we're very excited by it. I think it's going to become a very popular finish for the new 800 series.
Would you say that this is an upgraded finish to what I have on the 700 series?
Oh, listen, for sure. I mean, on the 700 series, I take it you have a rose nut pair.
Yeah, and they look great. I mean, I'll be honest with you, they look really nice.
Well, good. I'm glad you like it. The nice thing, of course, don't forget, particularly when you get to the colors, materials, and finishes that you can use on an 800 series diamond loudspeaker, is you've got that walnut aligned to the visible aluminium top plate, aligned to gray Connolly leather, real leather, which is very tactile and which smells and feels wonderful as well. And then the painted turbine head. So you get a whole series of interactions of really nice materials. And the tweeter body, again, you might be able to see it on the models behind me, on the white ones and the walnut ones are finished in unlike this, which is painted black, anodized black, pardon me. They're finished in an anodized silver finish. They look incredible. You can really kind of sense the fact that it's, you know, a good chunk of proper aluminium right there in front of you.
Awesome. Yeah, we got one more comment here. Someone I shot a short clip of the 800 grill covers, but they are easily the best I've seen and used.
Yeah, so we go put them. I'll put it on. And what I like about them is the like I'll put them on the one behind him. I love how they're just
magnetic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's just beautiful.
I love the trim because it matches the top of the speaker. Yeah.
Yep. It's just they just do a great job. You know, it's just a beautifully done. So, because the old one used to go top to bottom, wasn't it? Like they covered both drivers at the same time?
Which I'll be honest with you, we never liked. That was a late choice. We wanted to actually do that in the last iteration as well, and due to some feedback from our then boss, we actually changed the approach and went for what I can only describe as like the embracing cover. It kind of feels like it's grabbing the front of the speaker. But I don't think it was ever a particularly attractive choice. I think if you want to use a grill cover now, that's the kind of look that you want.
It's beautiful,
and we're very pleased with it.
Yeah, sweet. You know, the last thing I want to ask you about the 800 series, do we have an equivalent flush mount version of these speakers?
Yeah, we do. We did an upgrade on the CI 800 series, which was back in, let me think, 2018. Shortly after the DV series of woofers, and that moved them into diamond specifications. So they have a diamond dome tweeter, they have a continuum mid-bass or mid-range cone depending on the model, and they have the aerofoil cone low frequency. So you can align if you want. An obvious example is if you were going to do an Atmos system, you could have 4 of the model called the CCM 8.5D, which is a 7-inch two-way, which has kind of got an orientable kind of baffle, so it allows you to switch the system around to try and get whatever sweet spot you want from the downward firing array, and that works pretty well. If you wanted in-wall, there's a two-way version, which is called the CWM 8.5. It's the same specification, so 7-inch with a high frequency. That goes in wall for example, two channel, or for rear applications in something like a 7.1. And then if you really want to, there's also a 3-way system. The 3-way system's a great piece actually. It's called the CWM 8.3. D for diamond. In terms of the spec, it's a 5-inch mid with a pair of 7-inch woofer, and it can be arranged vertically, or if you flip it around to the horizontal, the central section can be picked out and turned to create.
Oh, that's awesome.
Get
Yeah,
the correct
so you get
orientation.
the proper orientation.
Yeah.
So they're starting
enclosure that goes in the wall too, by the way.
Oh yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm thinking about getting those myself because I think they're just because my wife wants. I love this performance, but she doesn't want to see anything.
Yeah,
and
that's a crime for such a beautiful speaker. That's a crime for such a beautiful speaker. You want those out in the room.
Yeah. But she wants it all disappeared. But the enclosure, I think Eric McBride had one. It was as tall as I was. So because it can only be as thick as the depth of the wall of the space inside the wall, and it actually is suspended and everything else inside the wall. And
it is exactly. Yeah, I mean it's a fully braced system. Exactly right, Phil. I mean the back boxes are an integral part of the performance of all of those. They are mandatory with those models because we're trying to achieve a pretty high standard of performance. It's not necessarily the case with every installed speaker that we do, but with those models, it's a requirement. And they can even be, believe it or not, they can even be bi-wired and bi-amplified as well. So the intent is, for example, let's say you wanted to create a mixed theatre system where you wanted to have your left, right fronts as visible speaker, but perhaps you wanted your center channel, your Atmos units and your surrounds as installed speaker, so you didn't see them, to be able to kind of mix and match, but still deliver a consistent level of performance throughout the space.
Yeah, that's high spousal approval right there.
And what speakers do you recommend for in-ceiling Atmos if you have a 800 series?
For the 800, it would be the CCM 8.5D. It's a good piece. It's got as I say, the same configuration fundamentally as an 805 two-way, but mounted in an in-ceiling application.
Awesome. So they're starting an arms race here in our forum. They're asking who has bigger arms, me or Phil. I'm gonna go with Phil. I'm just gonna say you do, Phil.
No, Gene works out, but the problem is I haven't worked out in forever. Gene still works out, so that's different. So
I've actually been I've been doing intermittent fasting, and I've cut 10 pounds in the last 2 months, and so I'm not as big as I was, but my body fat's lower, and it's helping my blood pressure. And that's at my age or our age. You got to worry more about your blood pressure.
Yeah, I think I need to start doing what you're doing because it's starting to go more around here than anything else. So
yeah, I lost 2 inches on my waist in the last couple of months. So it's
well done.
Let me tell you, if you want to lose weight healthy and still have more energy, intermittent fasting, look it up. 16-8, it works. It really does.
Okay.
Cool.
What about subs? What about subs? Tell me about the
about
Bowers and Wilkins subs. Do you have any updates on your subs? Or if I'm using a Bowers and Wilkins system, do I go with Bowers and Wilkins subs, or do I go with definitive subs? Or since it's all one happy family, what kind of system would you put together for bass if you have this?
It depends on your requirement, and as you know, we produce range aligned subwoofers in the 800 series. The models that we refer to as DB series. They have dual opposed cones in 8-inch, 10-inch, or 12-inch. They use the same cone technology, so the aerofoil cone. So in the 8-inch model, it's dual opposed with a kilowatt of output. Then you have the 10-inch model, which is the same. Or if you go for the 12-inch model, it's a 2 kilowatt output. So they're substantial pieces. They have pre-built EQ profiles within them. So if you wanted to run them in a 2-channel configuration, obviously if you're using it with an AVR or a processor, the chances are you're likely to use the EQ within that and the configurations within that. But if you wanted to run it in a 2-channel configuration, you can preset through the app. The setup app that comes with the product to align it to the model of 800 series loudspeaker, or indeed 700 series loudspeaker that you have. So it will automatically apply the correct filter to kind of align in with the system. They are updated in terms of the app and the profile and the EQ to match with the latest models. But currently they're technically unchanged from the existing range. So they've been around for, I guess, approaching 3 years now.
Yeah, actually in this room we had a pair. And we had the Class A with two configurations. So one of them is just the 800 series 801s, and then the other one would actually bring those in. And I think he had them starting at like 30.
Yeah.
Just for really low reinforcement in the space.
Oh yeah,
and you can just switch
subsonic.
between, so you can just switch between the two configurations.
Sure.
We're using them for, like, you know, deep, big orchestral classical music and things like that. So
I think it's a really interesting configuration, right? I mean, you know, it depends on the room, obviously, and your own taste and requirements. But there's a really interesting effect in 2-channel with listening with subwoofers, how it helps you, to your exact point, kind of hear the space, right? Particularly
spaciousness. It's called spaciousness.
Yeah.
Basisness.
I like that word. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
I will now be using it. That's officially stolen.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's something to it.
If you're increasing your basiousness, I like that. Of course, there's another interesting point, and it goes back on your point about integrating with installed speaker. Of course, having a aligned range of woofers or choice of woofers helps with perhaps a more compact system as well. You know, some people might aspire to the output, the scale of a big 10-inch system like the 801, but they might not have the space, the available footprint in the room that they're listening in. And a really great alternative to that is like an 805 or an 804 with a woofer
or two. So I want to let you guys I want to let you in on a little secret. I've been working behind the scenes with James Larson, Matthew Pose, and myself. And you guys know we have the Bassaholic ratings on subwoofers, and Extreme is our biggest rating so far. It takes a really good subwoofer to get the Extreme rating, but you know what? We're about pushing the envelope of performance like you guys. We're working on a new standard, a new certification, and it's called the Bassaholic Maximus.
Nice. Nice.
Yes. So we're going to be releasing the specs on that soon, and we definitely have to be checking out some of your hard-hitting subs and get them certified to be Maximus.
Yeah, we actually in our theater, actually when we first started, it sounded like there was it sounded like there was an earthquake going on next door. So in the big theater, we're running what the Bowers Custom Theater 8.2s, pretty much all the way around, with the 15 CT SW15s for the bass for each channel, and then we're using 2 of the Descend 15s in there for LFE. And we measured the room. It's 10 dB up at 18 hertz. So it doesn't roll off. The deeper it gets, the more output it makes. So it's pretty. Everybody says it feels like a roller coaster ride. It's not.
Well,
you feel
if you put on like Dark Knight Rises, I think the one with Bane in it, and when the Batwing takes off when they're chasing him, if you have subsonic bass below 20 hertz at meaningful output, your spinal column will shake. Like literally, when that scene, I feel my spinal column shaking, even though I don't hear it. I just feel
Gene, you just gave me a new demo because I'm gonna actually go to my Kaleidoscape right now and download that.
It's the scene where he's running from the cops, and then they think they got him, and then all of a sudden he just kind of pulls out with the Batwing, and literally my spinal column is doing this. It's killer.
Love it.
Well,
that's awesome.
Well, awesome, guys. This sounds great. I'm really serious about getting those 804 D4s. So when you have a set and you want to send them my way, I will check them out because I am a big fan of what I've heard in the past with the D3s, and I never had a D or 800 series in my own house. So that would be awesome to check out.
Great, love to.
Yeah. So as it's always a pleasure, Gene. It's
appreciate having you guys here. Andy, I hope you have a safe travel back and you get to enjoy your time away out of isolation for a little bit longer. I know Phil has set up an amazing facility over there. I can't wait to eventually get out there and do all the demos and do a tour of what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, I can vouch for that. You're definitely going to love it. I mean, this is my first time here, but it's super impressive. He's done a great job.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this live stream event with Bowers and Wilkins. Check out the 800 D4 series. Hopefully you have a local dealer that you could go do some demos, or maybe you could go to the Sound United facility if you're an Audioholics member and you mentioned that you're a fan of our site. Maybe they'll open the door for you so you could do some demos if you're in that area. Awesome. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. Gets us producing more videos like this. You get direct access to us if you want to ask questions or suggest video topics. Phil, Andy, hope you guys have a great night.
And of course, before I got to go, I got to remind you guys that Sound United also has a YouTube channel. So if you go to
True.
if you go to YouTube and you look up Sound United Training, I've had guys like Andy come, and the designers like Matt Lyons from Polk Audio, and a lot of our other Dave Knobber from Class A. So if you want to spend some time with these guys and hear what they have to say, make sure that you like and subscribe to that channel as well, because that allows us to buy cameras and do this kind of stuff. So keep that in mind.
And I'll look in the description below to the official Sound United YouTube channel, so that way everyone can check it out if they can't type it and find it.
Okay, excellent.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, you guys are a great group. I mean, I've never seen a company on such a large scale, every division of it be so passionate about the brand. And you know, I think Sound United has done an amazing job of keeping the brand separate, keeping the brand identity strong, but also keeping the passion alive. It's just it's inspiring to watch.
Yeah, I always say, look, think of us almost like, if you look at the Volkswagen group, that's like my favorite analogy. Volkswagen deals with mobility, but each brand is given their own autonomy to do it the way they want to do it. So whether it's Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini. So, but the whole goal is just for us is great sound. And each brand is given their own leeway to do it their way, and we're just here to support.
Awesome. All right. With that said, it's a wrap. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.
Take care, everyone.